It is Tuesday, February the 25th, 2025, and this is a meeting of the Comox Valley School District regular board meeting. Nice to see you all today in this space. It's the first time we've held our public board meetings in this space. And it's bright, and big, and airy, and in a different configuration than we're used to.
Yeah. It feels very
We look forward to your feedback. My name is Michelle Waite, and I have to remind myself right now who I am. We'll start off. The next piece of the meeting is the adoption of the agenda.
I can make that motion that the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley adopt the February 25th, 2025 board meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Vice Chairperson Howe. Seconder is Trustee Leslie. Seeing those in favor? Opposed? And then that's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the January 28th, 2025 regular public board meeting minutes as presented. Trustee McConnell-Keene.
The Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley, adopt the January 28th, 2025 regular public board meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. Seconder is Trustee Eldinger. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. There is no unfinished business. And we have record of two in-camera meetings, two meetings. A regular in-camera meeting on January 8th, 2025, and closed committee of the whole meeting February the 11th, 2025. I do not have a board chairperson report tonight. My life's been a little full, and probably it would have been better written than verbal. So I look forward to sharing the culmination of items at our next meeting. Thank you. Moving on to presentations and delegations. And tonight we have two. And the first will be presented by our Associate Superintendent, Joe Hesla. And it's the How Are We Doing report for 2023-24 for Aboriginal students. Welcome, Joe. We look forward to you testing the technology for us tonight. And are you comfortable in standing, or would you be more comfortable sitting?
Thank you for asking. I'm comfortable standing. Thank you very much, everyone. And I apologize if I moved over here preemptively. I know we have a packed meeting, so I'm just trying to make sure the tech works out all great. I want to just share, I believe in your board package you have the full How Are We Doing report. I've been reading these for a long time, and I've summarized the goods for you here in this PowerPoint here. And of course, you have a masked version. So there's one of the great things about having the unmasked version is that I know what I can and I cannot share. So I've managed to sort of glean what I can without breaking any laws throughout this. So just a couple background pieces here. You'll notice that it's called the Aboriginal How Are We Doing report. So I just want to share that's terminology that I remember in my last year at the ministry, having folks from different districts ask. We've all moved to Indigenous. What's going on? And I believe that there is a highly technical piece with the data governance and analytics department there. So it requires a great deal of time, and it's a small but mighty team at the ministry. So when asked, Vanessa was fine with Aboriginal for now. We want to see the numbers. The data is what really matters. So I'm going to be using Indigenous every now and then. I might slip up and say Aboriginal, but no offense. Just want to clear that up. Any questions about that? Okay. The How Are We Doing report began in 1999. This provides comparative data between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students throughout the province, as well as in districts. And that would be self-identified students, First Nations status, non-status, Métis, and Inuit. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of our data is masked due to small sample size. And just a note here, when we're looking at that report, and I went back into last year's 1701, I noticed that in here it says that we have 1880 students. That's high, too high for how many Indigenous students we actually had last year, which according to our 1701 count was 1,716. I call that the NIDES factor. Last year we had 240 students across British Columbia, and some of those students could be in one course or all courses. It's really difficult to navigate. I did throw out an email to Jane, the director at Indigenous Education at the ministry, just saying, hey, I know you've heard this before, but we have a unique situation here. Can we get tighter on the data? And I'm waiting to hear back from her, but obviously this will skew our data slightly. We're roughly 150 students over, but I would argue that knowing the data markers that I'm going to look at, nothing jumped out as unusual for the Comox Valley. Lots of the trends that we've seen for many years are occurring here with those extra 150. So now, lastly, just want to say Finesse continues to advocate for this gap analysis. So I'm going to be talking a lot about differences in numeracy, literacy, all that, and this is with regards to driving systemic changes. So Finesse is definitely holding districts and the province to account for those gaps. So, and in fact, I think that Finesse would have liked to have had final exams still, because we were finding some practice where students were not getting, they were getting great marks on their final exams, but really poor marks in class. Across the province, that showed something, right? So here we go, strap on in. Indigenous students make up roughly 16.6% of all Comox Valley students here. So what we're looking at here, and this would be in your package as well, is that 47% of all the students in alternate programs are Indigenous, yet Indigenous students make up 16.6%. So you can see that there is a disproportionate representation there versus non-Indigenous students in alternate programs. And also just jump in and interrupt me at any point. You'll get bored of hearing me. So you'll notice this is a 5-year trend, and this is with regards to alternate programs. I just found Indigenous males and females. I found that was interesting data here. It's not entirely unusual, but certainly more Indigenous females in alternate settings than males. Students with disabilities and diverse abilities. So again, you'll notice I continue to have that Indigenous students are 16.6%. Yet, when we look at behavior, right? Notice how Indigenous on the left, or Aboriginal, much higher than non-Indigenous. And yet, if you look at the learning, right, when we're talking about different abilities, you'll notice that they are not necessarily, they're a little bit lower. And so this is something I noticed across the province as well. Often undiagnosed concerns can just be flagged as behavior. So that's something for us to consider. Also note the absence of gifted for the last 5 years and sensory as well. I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just showing data. Okay, so we're looking at the FSA now. And some, as you'll see, mass, what can I show? 53% in the last calendar year emerging for grade 4 Indigenous students versus 29% were in emerging in non-Indigenous. Just some comparative data for you. This is really interesting. I have this kind of a slide after each of the other ones. So we can look back all the way back to 2007, 2008. Red is the Indigenous student data trajectory, and blue is the non-Indigenous. So you can kind of see how they've been hovering around and never quite making parity. And that the last few years, we are on a bit of a downhill trajectory with grade 4 reading literacy. So we look at grade 4 numeracy. We see once again, lots of mass data, but we can tell that 63% of Indigenous students were emerging in grade 4 versus 39% for non-Indigenous students. And this is the trajectory again for numeracy. So in grade 4, we have a very similar slide in the last 3 years. Numeracy, or reading rather, for grade 7. So lots of masking, but we can, now this is different. Now we're looking at what's on track. Who's on track? We want a higher number, yeah? Or extending. So for Indigenous students, 57% are on track, whereas non-Indigenous, 69%. I just want to pause here for a moment and just state, I'm sure nobody's thinking this here, but this is what I'd say if I was going into a district I didn't know. Sometimes we see a gap analysis and part of our brain can go to that place of like blaming Indigenous students or drawing conclusions around intelligence of people based upon a gap analysis. And I just want to remind us, obviously, since we're doing the equity scan, that I know that that's not what we're thinking, but we really want to be thinking if that thought creeps into our mind, there's deeper questions we can ask ourselves about how we're reacting to that data. Again, here is our long-term trajectory looking at grade 7 reading and literacy. Grade 7 numeracy, again, now we're back to the emerging category. You can see that 50% of Indigenous students are emerging in numeracy for grade 7 as opposed to 36% for non-Indigenous learners. And again, numeracy across the board. I think I failed to notice or to mention that I noticed literacy grade 7 had a little bit of an uptick. So we were like, that was kind of some good news, given that the grade 4s were kind of on the decline. Grade 10 numeracy, this is where I got tricky with mass data because everything was really, what could I show? Well, this is what we can show, proficient or extending. We're not giving anything away here, but for Indigenous students, 34% in grade 10. For the numeracy assessment, 34% were proficient or extending versus 50% for non-Indigenous learners for proficient or extending. Now, often we look into workplace math versus pre-calc and that sort of thing. So here's where, again, we're 16% of all Comox Valley students, 37% of all Indigenous learners who are taking a grade 10 math, so we have are taking workplace math versus 22% of grade 10s of non-Indigenous learners. So when we flip to the following year, right, and we start thinking about pre-calc 11, we notice that 20% of Indigenous learners are taking those courses, taking that course versus nearly double non-Indigenous learners. So you think about like where we're graduating, where are our life chances and expectations. We see that there's an inequity there. And I like this graph at the bottom here where it's got, once you're in there, right, once Indigenous learners are in there, the gap it narrows quite a bit with regards to C+ or better. So again, just want to make note of thoughts of whether any deficit thinking when we're looking at a gap analysis. Grade 10 literacy assessment, we have 58% of Indigenous students are proficient or extending versus 77% of non-Indigenous learners. Now if we go to the grade 12, and I'm nearly wrapping up my riveting data session with you folks, literacy assessment, 67% for Indigenous learners versus 79. And again, I really had to get creative to be able to share some meaningful data because on the How Are We Doing report, it starts masking almost everything and really difficult to really draw out our conclusions from that. So nice to be able to have both copies and then be able to share what we can. And this is just, this slide is my last slide, just to, or second last slide, just to show the difference in grade 12 English. 73% for those students are achieving, Indigenous students are achieving C+ or better versus 85% in English grade 12 courses there. And oh yes, I've got the completion rates. Can't forget about those. We're looking at 5 years worth of data here. So the dark blue represents the most previous, the closest year to us. So if we're looking at 5-year completion rates for all of us, we all know this, grade 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, goodbye. We used to only measure 6-year completion rates. FNESC has asked us to look at those 5 years. Again, the racism of low expectations, why are we only looking at 6 years? So this is our 5-year completion rate. We see a gap here, as well as our 6-year completion rate. I found this data really it makes it look worse than it is. I know that it just is what it is, but 75% for 6-year completion rate here for Indigenous learners versus 82. And you can see, sort of see where we've been over the past 5 years with both cohorts. And lastly, with a bit of good news. Often in a lot of districts, this is way off. The adult dogwoods, again, we're 16.6% of all students, and yet Indigenous learners are 20% of the adult dogwood. So pretty close. There are some districts, I remember being at the ministry and we would talk to some districts that had really, like it was flipped and inverted and lots of pushing through those adult dogwoods and adult dogwoods early as well. So really happy to see that for last year. And I think that's it for me. And now it's over to questions.
Please, anybody have any questions or comments? Or who will be the person to raise their hand for a question or comment?
I don't know if this is going to be a hard one or an easy one, but I was kind of like, what's next? Like, now, like, we have that data. Like, what are some next steps for you in taking that away and other things that you're working on?
Yeah, I think your question is a really excellent question for all of us. Quite often, I remember having that, feeling awkward about how to answer that question when I was the district principal for Indigenous Ed. Felt an overdue amount of responsibility as to how can we change this narrative and this gap. What's next is all of us understanding that this is our work. Is not going to be the Indigenous department to fix this gap. It's going to be all of us really digging in, and we're going to have those uncomfortable conversations, many at all kinds of levels. Great questions already about colleagues and friends and family that are thinking, well, isn't that the ISW's work? Come on, help those kids out. Let's help them out. That's like not where we want to go, right? And so what's next for me is making sure that the work that I'm doing is messaging that collective responsibility in a really kind way, but we're not letting up, not ever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Caton?
Thank you for the really good report, but just sort of back to what, so when you look at this art district and you look at the provincial data,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, like we have to do that comparison because that does program with the Ministry of Education, look at that one. Where are we in comparison with the majority of other districts? Are we on par, or are there things that we know that we need to look at, maybe a deeper dive and support that? And then the other side is speaking to students through your work on that one there, because students quite often know what they need best. Are we now going to the students in some of these classes and these programs and identifying their needs? Because just because we tell them we have to do it doesn't mean they really need to do it. Like, how are we doing student voice in this, supporting them also in their work?
Yeah, so two really interesting things. I don't want to take up too much time, but I can tell you that the gaps that we see and that slide that I hovered on with behaviors versus exceptionalities, that's almost universal across the province. In fact, we actually are doing somewhat better in that category. Lots of misdiagnosis in behavior for Indigenous learners. I consider that a bit racist, frankly. So that's a bit of a bright spot. I would say, like I mentioned earlier, adult dogwoods, like they're real jacked up in a lot of different areas. As far as the province goes, here's the trick, Janice. Like, we're not that bad. You know, we're like okay. That's like that's a dangerous perspective. So I purposefully left that out. I could have gone this big. All too often, what we can end up doing is going, well, we're doing better than Hazelton. Like, gosh, they're a mess over there. And then we kind of let ourselves a bit off the hook. So I'd say that overall, the numbers tell us a better story than the students that your second point of your question, which is the students and the staff. I can tell we have a lot of work to do in gaining trust with community, And the way that I see the scan working is, the equity scan working is really hearing those stories, capturing those stories. And I've been asked more than once from our district equity scanning team to ensure that our principals, our teachers, that there's a way in which we can present those voices and those stories right from the students themselves, if they feel comfortable to share it. That's engaging the heart. This was a slide deck all about the mind, but we don't change because of the mind. What's next? Make it better. But when you hear the student voice, that's the change.
Any other, Trustee Aldinger?
I'm not sure I have a question, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that there's so much data in the report that was behind this presentation. And a lot of what you've focused on is the more academic pieces. Yeah, there's so much also in terms of what like students' feelings around being welcome at school and safety at school and belonging at school. And there were a few areas with good trending upwards, but one of the things I noticed was like, do you like school? It seemed like that just kept progressively going down as kids get older, the students get older. And anyway, yeah, like just so much to reflect on in this report.
And I'm really glad that you brought up like the student learning survey data there. I have some different feelings around sometimes the validity of some of those questions. And we had those conversations at the ministry, how they're asked, how quickly are kids just clicking through. And I know one of the ones that is usually on the top of our minds, and I would typically keep in a report, would be, can you list 2 or more adults that care about you, right? But one of the things that I asked before we left is if we could change it to 2 or more adults that aren't the Indigenous support workers that care about you, because that's not really accurate data, and it's still yet lower, right? So you're right, it has so much information for us. Do you like school? Do you feel bullied at school? Do you feel like adults treat you fairly? Yeah, there's a lot. We could spend the whole meeting just on the student learning survey results. Why are things changing? Why are they up? Why is grade 10 such a bad year? Is it just a bad time to be a human? Both categories, Indigenous and non, are like, whoa. I have a grade 10 at home, so.
I have Trustee Leslie and then Trustee Maysack, and then I'm going to be mindful of the time and the rest of the agenda. Trustee Leslie?
Thank you for commenting that FINESC supports gap data. Oftentimes data, as you phrased it, data of the mind is looked at as not fulsome data. But this data is a constant measure that is used not only across district, but it is a fabulous tool, but it's only one of the tools. And so I wanted to make sure that, and I know, obviously you know this, but that there's many other types of data that are used in supporting all students, and in particular, the improvement of outcomes for Indigenous students. So as this seems very cold and calculating, literacy, numeracy, through the years, it did tell us a trend, but more importantly, looking at students' progress yearly at school on their report cards, their attendance with extracurricular activities, supporting Indigenous voice in the district. All of those things can put together a more fulsome picture that will help support an action plan on how to move forward. So as cold as this is data of the mind, it's so important, and thank you for presenting it so succinctly.
Thank you so much for this. One of the things that really jumped out to me, where I really hope that we're looking for where we definitely need work needed, is where our students share that they don't feel that they're being prepared for a job in the future or post-secondary education. And then when you look back to the reference of the Grave Child graduates entering community colleges, institutes, or universities, we can see that we have not done the work. And that's so sad. And I really look forward to seeing some action plans come forward to really help our students, because they've already told us. And now the data showed it. So I hope that we can really look at actioning these items as soon as possible.
Might I follow up just before I leave? The hook is coming. I know I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to share similar data next year, like different but similar. I just want you to all remember, beware of looking for low-hanging fruit. There is some. Beware of looking for the pat on the back. You've heard me say this before. The kind of change we're talking about is, I'm thinking about the meeting I had with Lelena this morning at 7:30. It's so foundational. It's so transformative, and it cannot be seen as, oh yeah, 3 years, we got this sucker. 1 year, we fixed all of racism. Like, I just want all of us, myself included, to remember this is the place where we are right now. That's what this shows. And it takes every single one of us, every meeting we have, to remember that and to stay firm. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We could have spent 2 hours at least on this. So thank you for being succinct, and thank you, trustees, for your comments. And I'm giving our Associate Superintendent and Safe School Coordinator a chance to set up. And so Jay Dixon will be presenting to us one of the, for the very broad and important topic of safe schools. And I should, because you still, and it looks like we're getting close.
We're getting there. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Perfect. And I even have some cool little swag and handouts for everyone this evening. Safe School Update. So in past years, we've really focused on, in these meetings and others, talking about erase resources, which I'm going to share once again. Critical incidents response, Safer School Together resources, training that we've done, district practices and procedures. I'm going to take a little spin on where we go next, because this isn't all that we do to keep our staff and our students safe. There's multiple layers of supports, and borrowing a word from my colleague Joe, it's our collective responsibility, all of us across the school districts, parents, teachers, our custodians, our principals, our district staff, all of us, to keep our staff and students safe. And I know these little orange things are distracting. I thank my grade 10 son who taught me something new on Saturday. So you're going to see these all through the presentation. But really, when we keep everybody safe, that leads to safe and caring schools overall. So as an activity, I mapped out all the different layers, and I'm sure I'm missing some in this next slide. Breaks all the rules of PowerPoint and Canva, and I think it's a beginning of our teams to add more to model what we do to keep our staff and students safe. So, wow, that's just the beginning, and I apologize if I missed anything, but there are all of us, our safe school coordinators, our district principals, our principal school staff, our students human resources, managers of health and safety, our ISWs. There's all so many embedded layers of school safety. That's a snapshot. And I'm sure there's many more that we can layer in there. And in future presentations, I'd like our teams to zero in on sections, to bring everyone up to speed and really look at where we are now and how can we improve. And looking at the data from the previous presentation, there are areas we can continue to improve. So fancy. This is one area in the next 7 minutes or so that I have left that I'd like to talk about. So erase. We've talked about it many times, but we're continuing to work to enhance our resources around erase. So training, we have all of our principals being trained on Thursday around erase reports, worrisome behavior reports, the Report It tool, and all of the erase resources. Since September, we've had parents and students using erase resources. We've had online parent info sessions that Erase has offered that I know our schools have been advertising, and thanks to Deepak and others who have been pushing out information. And hot off the press, if anybody wants any, on Thursday there's going to be stickers. I'm sure every school principal is going to curse me because we're handing out stickers to everybody. So on their lunch boxes, you name it. And for our elementary schools who may not have phones at school, which they probably shouldn't, there's other alternative ways to report with some posters here that I'll hand out. Really excited about the upcoming training. And I encourage everyone to go to the Erase site because it was updated a couple months ago. And there's a brief video at the end of my presentation with one of the videos from the new Erase site. Another area to zero in on briefly, and this could be 2 or 3 presentations in itself. Safer Schools Together. Safer Schools Together is a group, an organization, a company, I'll call it, that's contracted by our provincial government via Erase. So they have their own wide range of resources and things like worrisome behavior reports. We get a worrisome behavior report each month from Safer Schools Together. They go and scan for any worrisome behaviors online and report it to us. And knock on wood, our past 2 months, no reports. However, they also have an intake form and a data analyst and threat analyst to support us if we want to submit a name or concern or information. And they will work with our school teams or our threat assessment teams or our counselors or the RCMP to support a local reaction or investigation or just overall solution to a concern. We've been using worrisome behavior reports since the beginning of the year. Some have multiple follow-ups. One school might submit a request, an intake form, and work with the analyst, and then submit further forms. If Joe or Joe's children are up to no good online, we're able to scan everything and anything that youth has publicly facing, which I have here that will model some of the complexities for our trustees. Emojis. Excuse me. Still getting over a cold. There is actually training around emojis. Believe it or not. So there's various layers of threat assessment, screening, and training that can be completed by schools. I'm going to take a pause.
I would drink the water.
Yeah, I'm going to go over there and grab a Halls, but I'm going to jump into the next section. Megan's good. Good. All right. So, a couple other layers that I wanted to focus on this evening. Our manager of health and safety and our district safety programs. We have now the ability to track through our occupational health and safety tracking tool. It's called Prismatic, all incidents that impact our staff. So that is via our manager of health and safety. And we have the ability to drill a bit deeper into incidents that involve students and staff. And we feel that is an opportunity for us to look at more preventative measures to support our staff, which will ultimately support our students as another layer of health and safety. Next month's presentation, which I have a little screenshot of, we'll drill into more of the areas, particularly around emergency preparedness. And lastly, there was a presentation last month. We are all excited about the layers, the new layers of support that our new district principal has been beginning in the Valley. So in a short amount of time, we've had tremendous impact on the lives of our youth. Our district principal, Taiji, has captured the beginnings of that important work and helped already support the erase reports and other situations that have been emerging across the district. One piece that I really wanted to close with before the video was every student concern is important. And our students can report to erase. They don't have to. We encourage them to find a pathway where they can report to that trusted adult, whether that's a parent, teacher, ISW, bus driver, where they feel comfortable reporting it and it gets escalated to the school principal, or if the principal needs additional supports, counselors, district support staff, and others from across the district, depending on the situation, because everything's situational. There's not one size fit all support for our staff and students. Look, I got my voice back. And that really was the theme of this really brief presentation, was we all have the responsibility to support, and what might work for one student might not work for another student. So there's no one size fit all pathway, but we have to take everything seriously and work together to keep our kiddos safe and enjoying school. Last is a really brief video.
Every day, you face new experiences. The good news is, you're not alone. Erase offers support for safe, caring, and inclusive schools. Whether you're a student, adult, or school staff, Erase is here to assist you in finding the support and information you need. Students can use the Erase Report It tool. It's a confidential and anonymous reporting tool that empowers you to let your school know if something is not right. If you want to talk to someone, you can use the Erase website to get support by phone, chat, or text 24/7 and explore topics you may have questions about, such as mental health and substance use. You can find mental health resources and ways to talk with your friends and family about substance use so everyone can make safe and informed decisions about their well-being. Or online safety, where you can find tips on navigating social media and your online activity in a way that feels good to you. Erase also has resources for diversity and inclusion, including information on what to do if you or someone you know is experiencing bullying behavior, racism, or other concerns, including ways to take action to stop it. Adults, Erase offers help on a variety of topics, free training and information to guide you with new and unfamiliar conversations with children and youth. School staff can access free resources and supports to enhance your classroom and training to promote a positive, inclusive learning environment. Ready to get started? Visit the Erase website today and take the first step toward creating safer and more supportive school communities.
I encourage everyone to share the Erase resources and site, encourage parents to go there. And I'm trying to get to the next page.
Every day.
There we go. And I had to sneak in one little more blinky thing. Next month, really specific around school district emergency response, which is timely considering some of the events, earthquake events we've had this week. And thank you for your grace through my little coffee healing from my cold from last month. Any questions?
Yeah, I already see at least one hand up. I wanted to thank you for the report. You're right, sometimes it's tricky to know where to begin. It's such an important basket that holds all of our students and employees is safety. Trustee Caton.
Yes, thank you. So my question is the interpreting and translating of emojis. For many parents, when they look at this, they're going to have this, oh my Lord moment.
I know I did at home.
I know when I saw that, I did. And I'm wondering, as a district, through yourself or principals and vice principals, how are we disseminating this information to parents so that they're aware of what these emojis are happening with many of our young people in the community and understand their prevalence, especially when it comes to the substance abuse, the self-harm, and some of the other ones. When you look at them and when they're by themselves, they're rather innocuous, but when you put a few of them together, it's quite alarming. So can you just maybe address how we can ensure that this information is shared within our community so that parents are aware of the meaning of some of these emojis?
So true. I know when I went through that digital media training myself, it was a very interesting dinner time conversation with my family, trying to interpret those. I would encourage everyone, and we're going to continue to do so, promote the family sessions or through Erase. They cover many of those topics. Safe Schools Together has a variety of kind of quick informational items. But outside of Erase and Safe School Together, we've been having conversations with our Director of Infotech and our district support teachers around digital safety, digital etiquette, all under the bundle of digital literacy. So there are currently some schools already really diving into safety and ethics around AI, what and how you use your phones and emojis. And I gave you this one as one example of various areas, but that has been an eye-opener for many of us. And continuing to provide resources and information sessions and just try to get in front of it with our youth. Even though that we discourage phones from being in our schools, a lot of this is happening in the evening too. So great question. It's work that we all need to continue to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about the worrisome behavior reports, and mentioned that there hadn't been any in the last 2 months, I think, but that that it's a resource that can be initiated from the district to request a scan? And I'm curious, is that a request that generally stems from a school level? Or if there was a concern at a school, would it be brought to someone at the district, and then at the district level, and the district level would then reach out and initiate that request? Or can parents do it on their own?
It's not for parents. It's something that we pay for as a district, a subscription fee. And part of that is they do a monthly report that we do not instigate. So they do scans throughout the month. And if something pops, or there's a concern, or someone posted a picture with a weapon, it would be sent to district office. And then we would filter where that goes, whether it's to the RCMP or elsewhere. I'll use the weapon example. Within minutes of getting the report, the RCMP verify that it was not a weapon, and that it was, the picture was actually a picture used in a post 2 years ago from something else. So if worrisome behavior reports are great because they're very timely, and it allows us to react accordingly. Our principals are the ones that can issue an intake form. And every time that they do, if they have a concern, it's flagged within our office. There's 2 of us associates that get flagged. And sometimes within minutes, but sometimes it's about an hour turnaround, the analyst will get back to us and the school principal, but it's put in with either wanting more information or a scan of a report. And I'd love to do a presentation just on worrisome behavior reports in the future. And our principals also work with our school counselors, or it could be another district personnel that gets tasked for follow-up. So it depends on the report and the situation.
But it can be initiated from the district rather than from the receipt of a worrisome behavior report. Yeah.
It's a service that we utilize at different layers in our system, and it's one piece. But some of the reports are, we'll get a report saying a potential mental health concern, where a young individual is posting some concerning just songs or posts on their social media, and then we'll confidentially follow up with school counselors will follow up, or a trusted adult will follow up with them, and it could escalate. And sometimes we're getting in front of some cries for help.
Any questions or comments from trustees? And again, another night that we could just have this as the sole item to unpack and
And we're all passionate about this work, keeping our kids and our staff safe. And there's lots of pieces on that map that we'd appreciate coming back and sharing about. And if there's something really missing, please let us know.
thank you
Thank you
very much.
Thank you for the halls. I feel better. Here's some stickers.
Great. Superintendent, gonna share his district report.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I just want to share, it's interesting always to have this opportunity in this space. We use the space for a wide number of things. Tonight, I'm grateful for this opportunity. We had an opportunity last month for senior leaders and school board office staff to come up here and sit in circle and participate in a transformative workshop called The Village with Kathy Camilleri, who brought a simulation of a traditional Indigenous village to learn about community, interconnectedness, and responsibility. Kathy Camilleri, just a powerful facilitator who shared words of wisdom, powerful ideas, and provocative perspectives for all of us to keep in mind. The hands-on experience provided a safe space for meaningful discussion around the impacts of residential schools, land displacement, and the critical importance of building a more inclusive and respectful future. And it was also an incredible reminder of the relevance and inherent value of how a village functions and set a really good example of what is possible. As we talk about learning, I'm super grateful and thank you to all of the folks who, particularly our Pro-D Day Committee, who those members all helped contribute to creating an engaging variety of workshops, learning activities, and professional growth opportunities across the district last week. I wanted to just highlight, it's nice to be sitting beside our musical theater trustee while I market the upcoming district musical, Once Upon a Mattress, running next week. There's still a few tickets left for each show, so there's still a chance to go and grab a ticket, and it's just another opportunity where we see fine arts flourishing with some of our youth in our district, supported by deeply passionate and committed adults. On the support of some of the extracurricular opportunities, just acknowledgement that basketball season is nearing its conclusion. In fact, I think it's concluded for most teams. However, the Isfeld boys senior team is off to provincials, coming in second place this past weekend at the Island Championships. But proud of all of our student athletes who participated. Hundreds of boys and girls participated this year, including many elementary students. And of course, like all of those things that happen outside of classrooms, just a big thank you to all of the volunteers and committed parents who facilitate all of the rides and all those other things to make those events happen. Some of you will have noticed in the school district office, we have some new gender neutral bathroom signs that were gifted to us from Cumberland's House of Allies. This is a group of students who designed these signs, and we just are expressing our gratitude for their advocacy and their commitment to creating safe and welcoming spaces for all. While I speak on that, we are also going to be gathered here on Monday with site-based and district leaders to participate in increasing our knowledge, capacity, and advocacy and support for 2S LGBTQIA+ students and staff with the SOGI Masterclass with Misha Oak. As we, not ironically tonight, wear pink shirts in acknowledgement that tomorrow is the National Pink Shirt Day, and that there is still much work to be done. I wanted to acknowledge a powerful No More Stolen Sisters artists in the classroom project at Highland Secondary. The project was an inquiry answering how can we honor and raise awareness around missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits across Canada while calling for an end to this national tragedy. So we had members of the Neen-Loxela, our elders and residents team, collaborating with several classes and the school's librarian. In particular, Joanne Rastoul shared cultural teachings and storytelling, guiding students in collaboratively designing and hanging mobile art pieces. At the conclusion of the project, there was an honoring ceremony that took place where students who participated in these lessons were thanked for their meaningful contributions. So I wanted to just acknowledge the work of Joanne, the dedicated staff at Highland Secondary, and to all of the participating students for the heartfelt and transformative work. It's interesting tonight having two presentations, one the How Are We Doing report, another around safe schools, and all of us wearing pink, with tomorrow being the day that highlights the importance of kindness, inclusion, and anti-bullying efforts in schools. And while that day raises awareness, it calls on us to all to be deeply committed to the ongoing work that is needed to create truly safe, supportive environments where all students feel respected and valued. I shared that we've had lots of meetings in this space, and one of the meetings that's really resonating with me tonight as we wear pink and talk about safe schools was a conversation facilitated with our student voice group, which you'll probably hear about a little bit later, specifically around student experience with gender-based violence, which highlights the work that is yet to be done in our schools so that every space in our schools is safe and students are supported. It was a powerful opportunity to hear directly from students, their lived experience, and a powerful calling for adults to continue to advance our practices to ensure that students are safe in schools. And then lastly, I just wanted to echo Associate Superintendent Heslop's comments that the deep belief that we have that gifts, abilities, and attributes of our youth are equally distributed in our community, but the results in our system are not. And so it is a system issue, not a youth issue, as we continue to work on that transformative practice that's required to fundamentally shift those outcomes for all youth. So I do want to finish by thanking our dedicated educators, our staff, our students, and our community partners for the ongoing support and commitment as we all work to create a learning community where everyone is safe, everyone is seen, and everyone is valued.
Thank you. Right. Moving to the next item on our agenda, which is the topic of board authority authorized. And our associate superintendent Jill is back on with us tonight. And I'll turn the floor over to you to walk us through the briefing on the one course.
Certainly. So standing over there. Or...
Wherever you prefer. We're giving you grace, given your footwear.
Yeah, I hope to be brief. It says courses, but really only one board authorized course to approve this evening. I've looked at other years, and this is, we just have the one. Romance language is 11. And you have the briefing note here. I did look through this course, suggested some changes, and I'm hoping that you see value in this course. And I mean, you have the entire BAW with you. I found, while it's, okay, let's face it, it's a little awkward. I'm thinking about Indigenous languages and our need to revitalize Indigenous languages. However, when I was reading through this, I was struck with how thoughtful some of the ways in which bringing elders in and understanding the importance of language to culture and ways of knowing and being, and tying that directly to Indigenous languages as well. It's not like Romance languages are necessarily on the decline. However, I do find this quite an engaging course in thinking about sharing that love of language and love of culture. And I hope that you find value in that.
Thank you. Are there any trustees that have a question about this course for our associate superintendent? Seeing none.
I can move the motion. That the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley approve the board authority authorized BAA course as presented in this briefing note dated February 25th, 2025.
And it's on page 75 of some of the agendas. And I will do from second. So thank you, Christine Masak, for seconding that motion. This is another opportunity for discussion. Seeing none?
Oh, I
Was
see
it
it.
discussion?
No, I see it.
Okay,
I just needed to see where it was.
wonderful. Seeing no hands raised for discussion, all those in favor? Down? There's none opposed, and that's carried. Thank you. Next, it's time for our business services for our Assistant Secretary Treasurer, Jennifer Nelson, to do a presentation to us regarding the 2024-25 amended annual budget and budget bylaw. It's not just very small. It's wonderful.
That's a good cover for your other shoe,
Director
Joe.
Candace.
Yeah.
And look at that, 2 seats, that's perfect.
Yeah, we're gonna just sit, we have lots of paperwork with us, so hoping that's okay. Screen. you. So, just presenting the annual amended 2024-25 budget tonight. So as you'll recall, we adopted the annual budget in June, and that was based on estimated enrollment. And at September 30th, we did our actual enrollment, as well as confirmation from the ministry of the recalculated grant. And so we've now populated the 2024-25 amended budget. We've provided a briefing in the agenda package starting on page 94, and it really summarizes the changes from the last budget to the amended. We went through extensive reporting and presentations to come up with the annual, and so now we're just going to focus on explaining the changes for you at this point. So I will just get started on that. So as I mentioned, we do base the amended budget based on actual enrollment. So I've been able to update this graph for you. You can see in 2024-25, we came in at 10,477 FTE. And we also do have our projections now available. Those were submitted to the ministry on February 14th. So I've been able to update this graph for you. And so you can see that we are projecting, we did see some growth this year from what we projected, largely due to our online enrollment. And then as we project out into the next 2 years beyond, we're seeing that dropping slightly. So we're still having slight growth, but it's not what we were seeing in previous projections. So you'll see that starting to level off and stay steady. So you've seen these graphs before in previous presentations. We've just updated them now with the latest information. So this is our operating revenues. Just highlighting the 96% of our revenues are coming from the Ministry of Education and Childcare grant. And so this table here highlights the changes from the annual. So you can see here that we've seen an increase overall in the operating fund of $3 million. And so one of the significant components of that is when we adopted the annual budget, we did not know the 1% COLA, cost of living adjustment at that time. So we had to proceed with getting the budget completed. And then the ministry announced after what that amount would be. So we've now incorporated that. So that makes up 1.16 million of that $3 million. And that is offset by the corresponding expenses that we also had to incorporate to add the 1% cost of living for teachers and support staff within the budget. Another significant driver is the enrollment increase that we saw. So this table right here outlines the impact of that. And so that is found on page 96 in your agenda if you're wanting to have a closer look at it, but we just wanted to put that up on the screen here. So you can see that really the increase of 1.9 million related to increased enrollment was largely due to our online learners, as well as the increase in unique student learners within inclusive education. So on the expenditure side, once again, we've updated our graphs and or our pie. And you can see that overall, the operating expenses are 81% goes towards instruction, with 12% towards operations and maintenance, 5% for district administration, and 2% for transportation. And so we didn't see a significant increase in how that pie is shaped. It's just overall we had to increase expenses, but we just wanted to update that and make sure that that is got the latest information. And then this pie graph is just slicing that same information in a different way. So you can see that of all those expenses, we are spending approximately 86% on salaries and benefits, and then 14% for services and supplies. And these have not changed, like the overall percentage still lies the same within the pie. So this table here highlights the increase to salaries and benefits in the amended versus the annual budget. So you can see it's increased by $2.78 million. So this is that 86% of the pie. This is the numbers here. We've got the 1% increase for the cost of living for teachers and support staff incorporated within the salaries and expenditures or benefits. We've also had to reconcile for exempt staff. There's annual increases that need to be approved by BCPC. So we've updated the amended budget to reflect the latest submission, and we've adjusted it accordingly. And with the increase in unique learners, we also need to build in some additional costs to support those students in inclusive education, which also includes the creation of a new position of a behavioral consultant. So that's built into the amended. There's two other positions that are incorporated into the amended. It was a matter of timing. So as the annual budget was getting adopted, there was a couple of other positions that were implemented around that time. And so we had to take note of them and build them into the amended. One of them is a manager of human resources, specifically related to labor relations, as well as 0.6 of the new district vice principal of Indigenous education is incorporated in the operating amended budget. And we also just wanted to note that there's also 2 term positions built within these costs. And for one-time, they're term positions, but they are funded with one-time surplus restrictions. And I'll speak a bit further around the surplus restrictions later, but just wanted to note that they are also built into these amounts when you're looking at the increase. One was for the district principal of diversity, equity, and non-discrimination. And the other one is for an Indigenous engagement and knowledge specialist. So moving on to the services and supplies. So this is the 14% of the pie, or where we're spending our funds. So you can see here that there is an increase of $1.1 million over the annual budget. 721,000 of this is related to one-time initiatives where the board approves surplus restrictions to fund them specifically. So as you recall, we go through the budget process, and then there's the year-end process. The audit has to happen, and then we know where we land for surplus at the end of the year. So I'll touch on that a bit further later, but just wanting to note that that is included and they're not ongoing expenses. They include funds for strategic initiatives, Tribune Bay business case, funds for long-range facility planning, and moving and renovations for Indigenous and inclusive education office spaces. In addition, there were in-depth reviews of operational services across the organization, and we had to make some adjustments to ensure that they were adequately funded to the expected and committed levels of service that were needed across our facilities as well. We also had to adjust for increases to the school protection plan. So those are our insurance premiums, as well as digital services from the ministry. So those are amounts that they inform us in December. We don't know at the annual budget time. So we incorporate those into the amended budget as well. And then just finally noting that here we've also incorporated $100,000, which is to acknowledge the commitment that the board made to move costs for the district principal of Indigenous education and Indigenous education elders out of targeted funding into operating. So that's a commitment over 3 years. So we've acknowledged that, and we've built that into the budget now so that we can ensure those funds are there and that we won't experience a cost pressure in the next budget as we try to add it in. So this table here just highlights the overall change in the operating budget. So you can see the increase of revenue of $3 million. Expenses overall, so that's the salary and benefits as well as service and supplies, is increased by 3.8 million. And just to note, of that 3.8, 2.2 are related to ongoing or increases to the current year operating expenses. And the remaining 1.7 are related to some of those one-time initiatives where we actually secured surplus to fund them. So they're not ongoing. And I'll explain the change to local capital in a later slide, but I'll just touch now here on the budgeted use of prior surplus. So as I mentioned, when we developed the annual budget in June, that budget had to rely on $799,714 of prior year surplus to balance the current year operations. So these are ongoing operations that ultimately would compound. And so that is considered a budgeted structural deficit because it would potentially grow if we don't take care of finding efficiencies or adjusting our services or have additional revenues come in. So at the time, we were anticipating landing in a surplus position in the current year, but we couldn't confirm that. So we can't build that into our budget. So when the year-end balances are available, then we go through our internal audit process and the board approves the restricted surplus amounts and what we're going to incorporate. So I'll just maybe for a moment here flip into a briefing. So this is the briefing because it was some time ago. I don't know if I can reduce that. Get that out of the way. Just highlighting the amount that was restricted at year end. So you can see this $2.8 million is made up of, you can see the 799,000 there. That was set aside to ensure we had those funds to operate in the next year. The other initiatives there you can see, there's the moving expenses I talked about, strategic planning funds, long range facility plan. They're all highlighted there. And a good component of that 681,000 are actually targeted funds that we have to hold and carry forward into the next year. And then that also left us with $2.3 million. Sorry, that's just coming up in front of unrestricted contingency reserve at that time. So ultimately, if I'll just flip back to the presentation. What we're doing is now we're able to fund all of those one-time restrictions with that 2.8 less what we thought we would need to fund our current year operating, and that's that $2 million there that we're budgeted use of prior year surplus. And we don't need to utilize prior year surplus to fund our current year operating. So we've essentially been able to work our way out of a budgeted structural deficit this year. So although it looks, we're using 1.2 million more, those funds were approved during that year-end process for those initiatives. So this is a really good news story. I wish I had the flashing arrow that Jay had, but yeah, so I just wanted to go a little deeper into that because it is just a one line item that looks significant, and just explain how we got there. I feel like I don't do a presentation without touching on the board policy around the contingency reserve. It's just so important to ensure we have those funds adequately there in case of a rainy day. But so we have the 1.5% is the minimum amount that's recommended, maximum at 3% of our prior year operating expenditures. And so with us being able to relinquish utilizing that 800,000, that brings the contingency or the budgeted contingency reserve for this year to $3.1 million, which is 2.6% of our operating expenses. So that's a much better financial position to be heading into the next budget year. And
I want to clap right now. Is that weird?
More clap.
so that concludes the operating fund. But our budget bylaw also includes special purpose funds too. So I just wanted to touch on that. We have 23 special purpose funds. They are all externally restricted, so they can only be used for specific programs and approved expenses, but they all do roll up into that bylaw. So this table here just summarizes the change from the annual to the amended. So we receive all of the updates from the ministry tables, and we've updated those funds as well. So I won't go through them in detail, but on Schedule 3A, which is pages 117 to 118 of your agenda, you'll find all of the special purpose funds with the amounts, and we've explained in the briefing what some of those changes are related to. So we've got changes to school generated revenues, increased classroom enhancement funding around remedies and contractual increases, and labor settlement funding. We're also adjusting relating to student transportation, early care and learning, early childhood education dual credit program, and official languages in the education program. So as we have those revised amounts, we update them accordingly. And then lastly, the capital fund. That is also included in the bylaw as well, and includes land, buildings, computer hardware, vehicles, furniture, and equipment. We made a few minor adjustments to the budget just to reflect some updated amortization and investment income in the capital fund, as well as just wanting to touch on this adjustment for local capital. So that's local capital funds, those areas that the ministry doesn't cover, such as modulars and IT equipment. So the annual transfer in the annual budget was for $1.4 million, and we've increased that amount by $425,000. It is funded by prior year restricted surplus, which was on that list that I showed you. And it's really related to our commitment to supporting the Cumberland Community School renovation or addition. So the ministry requires us to commit a portion to the project, as well as there's some local government commitments that we've made to help refurbish and replenish some assets, community assets that we need to set funds aside in a reserve for. So that's what that includes. So that's catching us up. It's a one-time transfer into the reserve this year. So with the board's new strategic priorities, we're trying to really tie what we can towards each of the strategic priorities. So this was our first attempt as we brought together the amended and we could identify the changes. We did our best to highlight where they might fit with the strategic plan. So this is directly from the report, the briefing. I just thought I wanted to draw it to your attention. So you can see we've touched on several there, and this is something we're going to try to do as we embark on the 25-26 budget to be able to identify how it's tying into your strategic plan for you. So lastly, the budget bylaw, just drawing your attention to it in total, it's $163,483.16. So pretty significant. And looking for the board's approval and adoption tonight. We do have a couple weeks to get it through to the ministry for the deadline, but really looking for your approval tonight and happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
And you're right, Trustee Masak, it's, feels good to know that it's positive, more positive for Holt than could be in what other districts are facing. And I'm looking for trustees, Trustee Caton.
I have a question, because you know me. Really great report, and thank you kindly. I just have two questions, and I know that we're out of the structural deficit, which is great. But looking at your projections for possible students enrollment being a little bit lower next year, looking at the transportation operational cost and looking at the ongoing cost, this year we're out of the structural deficit. Long-term projections, I look at that one there. I kind of have remnants of budgets in the past, being around as long as I have, because I'm the old person on the board here, that I think we're going to be looking at a status quo. I mean, it's great that we're doing this, whatever, and we're out of it, but I'm wondering anticipation for next year and how we maintain what we're doing right now, because we've got some really good programs happening. We're managing. Do you see this budget being continuing on with the good news from the government funding it, or are we still looking at maybe really reviewing what we're doing and being very cautious approach as we go to next year? Because next year's budget is a couple of months, and I'm looking next year, looking at some of those numbers, and they look problematic to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to help answer that question. I think, it is very good news, and it's good to mark this moment as we start to, what we're doing is living within our means. But I think we can anticipate that will be, just like household budgets, tougher and tougher to do with inflationary pressures and other complexities. So I would anticipate that we will still have difficult budget decisions this budget round and through the next number of years, that budget cycle. So the good news is we're not borrowing funds to operate today. But the reality is that we can anticipate the ongoing complexity of really tough budget decisions with it, particularly as we see the needs continue to expand and the resources don't necessarily match that. So, long story short is there are difficult budget decisions still to be made.
I have a follow-up to that nobody else has any questions. So when you're going back to our strategic plan and you have money that's allocated to that, is that money allocated yearly, or is this year allocation, and then next year we're looking at a different allocation? As you look at the strategic plan, you have the little chart on over there. So is it this year, or is that going to be in next year? I'm not sure how that works.
So some of it's related to the one-time restrictions and some is ongoing. I just tried to identify where some, so for example, I looked at the movement of the funds from targeted Indigenous education of the 100,000, plus I added the knowledge the position that was also a one-time funded. I just wanted to identify how we're spending money on these areas, period. And there, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys in your department for this great work, and I really appreciate seeing the increase in our operating contingency reserve this year. It definitely makes me feel better for going into next year, and it puts us in a good spot. I really appreciate the thought that's been put into this. I'd like to move the motion, if that's okay.
Actually, there's still a couple more.
Okay, because we can ask questions after that too, can't we?
Pardon
We
me?
could still ask questions after.
Ideally, if we could
Do it first, okay?
get our questions out, because that would probably make a difference in how we're going to navigate the next piece.
Okay.
So I'm just, go ahead, Trustee Eldinger.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate your fullness and clarity of every budget presentation you bring forth. One of your slides highlighted some of the one-time pieces this year, including the new positions. And the third item was an in-depth review or in-depth reviews of operational service and supply budgets and adjusting to assure they're adequately funded to the expected and committed levels of service. And I'm just curious, I don't feel like I really understand what that means. Is that something that was contracted out to other people, or what does that?
Yeah,
Yes.
it really entails a deep dive into operational budgets for supplies and services across operations, and looking into how have we been trending, and we were able to make reductions in some line items, and there were some increases in other line items, and it's really been about ensuring that our budget is matching what's been committed in terms of contractual obligations, and what's, an example might be in the amount of toilet paper and supplies that we're needing at all the schools. We've been short budgeting in some areas, and we just need to right size it due to inflation and growth. That hadn't really, from a capacity perspective and a funding perspective, we haven't had the ability to do that. And so we're really just getting ourselves in a position where we can move forward. So we did find some savings, and we saw some areas that we needed to adjust the budget to make sure we could commit.
It wasn't clear to me whether there was
Yeah.
money spent
Okay.
on a service to do that, or it sounds like that's the adjustment after the review has taken place. There's a recognition that there are some costs that can be cut, but others that actually need to be increased. Yes, okay. Thanks.
You guys okay?
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you, because I got confused about the budgeted use of prior year surplus. I was trying to do the math, and it was hopeful to have that snapshot on the screen of the item from, I believe, the September board meeting, where the board approved the spend once year-end had happened and been audited. So I really appreciate that. I do know I will probably ask questions in the future about when you're doing your budget planning, and then when we pass our budget, what items are actually included in the budget that were talked about during the budget consultation process, and then what items you wait to insert into the amended budget, because that confused me a little bit about some of the timing of when did those things happen. But I appreciated that you worked that information into your report tonight, so that was really helpful. Thank you. When we get to this next step, so my agenda is in a bit of a different order than everybody else's, but I just, on page 106, that's where I have the amended annual budget bylaw page. And I think it's on a different page for other people. It's 106. It is what mine. Everybody's 106, great. So we don't, we don't need to read it. What we need to read is in our agenda package, but I think it's just important for us to pause and look at it and recognize the amount of money that our board and our district is charged with spending in the wisest way that we can. So when we turn to our page 2 of our agenda, you'll see under the amended annual budget bylaw, you'll see a motion. The first motion stops where there's a blank space. And so there's 2 motions there. There's the first motion, if the board so chooses, that we will make a motion to do all 3 readings tonight. That's motion 1. And then from there is the first reading of the motion that indicates the first reading of the bylaw. So I just want to make sure that whichever trustee is going to raise their hand to read the first motion, that you know where to stop.
And further, if I may,
Yeah.
that in order to do the 3 readings of the bylaw in one meeting, that first motion needs to be unanimously carried.
All right, thank you. Trustee, well, I'm just now Trustee Maysack was gonna do it, and now she's stepped back a little bit. Trustee Caton had her hand up. Do you want to
Start off.
do the first motion? Okay, great.
That the Board of Education of School District 71 Comox Valley give all three readings of the School District Number 71 Comox Valley amended annual budget bylaw for the fiscal year of 2024-2025 in one meeting.
Seconder, Vice Chairperson Howe has seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion and heeding our Secretary Treasurer's words of process, all those in favor? Okay, that motion's been carried unanimously. And I'm going to turn to Trustee Masak to see if she would like to read probably one of the most complicated motions that we have to do in terms of a bylaw. You don't have to, but if you would like to, please go ahead.
That the Board of Education of School District Number 71 Comox Valley adopt the amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025 cited as School District Number 71 Comox Valley amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025, being a bylaw associated with the annual budget showing the estimated revenue and expense for the 2024-2025 fiscal year and the total budget amount, bylaw budget amount of $1,000,600. Or pardon me, 1,063,000, oh, pardon me.
163 million.
Yeah, $163,483,016 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, reading a first time and adopted on this 25th day of February 2025.
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Vice Chairperson Howe. A couple of trustees were looking, and I just wanted to make sure that that number was read correctly.
It was.
Do you want me to read it again?
No, I just,
She got it.
It was.
okay, great, because I saw, and I wasn't looking fast enough.
I just want to make just a point of clarification. My very first budget on my very first board meeting was $63 million. This is $100 million. I just had this moment, like it's $100 million in 18 years. This is how much it's expanded. Sorry, I just had to say that.
That's okay. You weren't for or against the motion, but it was a point of information.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
When you said that, I'm like, wow, $100 million more.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering if this last line, did she?
Read that, yeah.
Read
I
that,
really
and
get
so now we just have to carry it.
Okay,
We're
all
all in
right.
favor of it.
It's been moved and seconded, and if there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Thought I was doing okay, but I think I'm safe.
I can.
We're going to turn the page, and Vice Chairperson Howe.
That the Board of Education of School District number 71 Comox Valley adopt the amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025 cited as School District number 71 Comox Valley amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025, being a bylaw associated with the annual budget showing the estimated revenue and expense for the 2024-2025 fiscal year and the total budget bylaw amount of $163,483,016 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, read for a second time and adopted this 25th day of February 2025.
Seconder was. Any discussion? I was wondering if you might share about the $100 million, but not this time. Okay. Seeing no hands, all those in favor. And who would like to read? You're really excited about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trustee Caton.
That the Board of Education of School District number 71 Comox Valley adopt the amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025 cited as School District number 71 Comox Valley amended annual budget bylaw for fiscal year 2024-2025, being a bylaw associated with the annual budget showing the estimated revenue and expense for the 2024-2025 fiscal year and the total budget bylaw amount of $163,483,016 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, read a third time and adopted at this 25th day of February 2025.
How? Thank you. For discussion. Seeing no hands. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to our open committee of the whole board report, looking for a trustee to move this. Trustee Leslie?
That the Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley received the Open Committee of the Whole Board Report dated February 11th, 2025, as presented.
Seconder, please. Trustee Eldinger. Seeing hands raised for discussion, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Just a reminder that we will not be having an open committee of the whole meeting in March due to our board meeting happening in the next couple of weeks and then spring break. So the meeting will be Tuesday, April the 8th. The ad hoc policy committee next meeting will be March the 12th at 4 o'clock. And our next agenda will contain the minutes from a meeting that the ad hoc policy committee had recently, but we didn't have time to get them into the agenda. So you will have two sets of minutes at the, maybe not, maybe just one set of minutes when I'm looking at the date for the next public board meeting. Moving on to board business, if I haven't missed anything. It is the Indigenous Education Council, and Trustee Leslie, I'm wondering if you have anything to share about a recent IEC meeting.
Well, the IEC meeting was today, and so there is no written report. But the IEC has gathered as anew, I don't know how best to say it, but under the new School Act provisions, the IEC has come together as a group with community representatives and invited some amazing people to the table in order to represent Indigenous community. For example, there's a representative from YCHA. There is a representative from DPAC. And we haven't had representatives from YCHA in many years, and we've never had a DPAC representative. And so just an amazing group. I think there was about 20 people around the table today. And we met at Highland in the new Indigenous Education Gathering Space, which was phenomenal, as it was a very large room that could support all of us. And there is two new co-chairs for the Indigenous Education Council, and they ran the meeting. And my colleague Shannon attended with myself. So basically, everyone was just getting out their they're trying on their new legs, I guess, starting the process of running the meeting in a good way. An example of that is all of the partners. We gave written reports, and they were attached, and the discussion and the content was based around the Indigenous Education Council's directives. So I think a really wonderful push in a great direction. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions from trustees regarding that report, information in that report? Next, we have the Gender-Based Violence Committee report by Trustee Eldinger.
Yeah, thank you. Our committee continues its work. We've just finished our, I guess, 6th meeting. And I'll start by saying that the work we're doing is premised on the understanding that gender-based violence is a societal-wide problem and not one that is unique to our district, but one that there continues to be room for growth in the K-12 sector. And also reinforcing that we're not soliciting individual experiences and reports from anyone. We are reminding people of resources that exist within our school communities as well as our larger community and our province as a whole. If people do have individual experiences that they want to talk about and get support of. Yeah, so we've continued the work meeting with groups within our district. I had the pleasure of meeting with all of our secondary school counselors today for an hour and got some good feedback from them. I also had the pleasure of being part of the Student Voice Forum earlier this month, where the students engaged in a really, really lively discussion. And as Jeremy's mentioned in previous meetings, not only just offered a list of their concerns and observations, but also some good recommendations for work going forward. And we basically asked them what gender-based violence looks like, and if it's something that they see in schools, whether it's something that negatively affects them at school or their friends at school or anyone else they know, whether if it happens that they have a sense of what they can do about it, who to report to, and that was one area where a lot of the students said that they did have a sense of how to do it, but others said not. And then what can adults at schools do to better support this type of work? And so we've haven't fully collated all of the information that came back to us, but both students and staff have come up with a lot of suggestions around further education around prevention, further supports around prevention, further interventions, like within the school context and other ideas. Our next steps include a survey that we're working on that will be made available to staff, students, parents, caregivers, and community generally. I have to thank Josh profusely for the work that he is doing to bring that alive on the district website. We're hoping it is illuminated this week. I've had help from a few people with poster making that is geared towards a student audience. And there's been a lot of enthusiasm. So for anyone who works within schools, there may be quite a number of different possible posters. We're just with the view in mind that different images, different terminology will appeal to different types of students, and just trying to bring as many into the fold as possible. And we will be meeting again on March 5th. And I think at that meeting, really trying to grapple with when will we have a report ready for the district, because we don't want to bleed into another school year if possible. And I guess and the other thing I want to really make clear about the survey that we're putting out is that it is anonymous. All of the promotion of it really makes that clear. And it will have QR codes, so that's really easily accessible to students and to parents on cell phones, even though we discourage that at school. And I would ask, pretty much like everyone around the table, as you're going to your PAC meetings and entering into discussions, and we've got partner groups, to please promote the survey. We really are trying to capture, as many voices as we can, grown-ups, adults who work in our system, the kids we're supporting in our system. And I also just want to conclude with saying that we have received really overwhelming support with each group that we've met with. There's a great interest in the work that we're doing. There's a real appreciation of the work that we're doing. And from our district vice principal of inclusive education, Tara Ryan, almost every meeting of the committee, and then the other meetings that I find myself in with her, she repeatedly expresses appreciation for the trauma-informed approach that we are taking as a committee and increasingly as a district, and that just, yeah, is great to hear.
Any hands raised? For another time, because I'm being really mindful of time, I would love to explore or have the trustees learn. Gender-based violence isn't a term that was around when I was in high school. That was around when my children were in high school. I'd be curious at another meeting if you could share your experience with the students and if that term needed to be interpreted or not, but I don't.
Can I have 20 seconds to say, one of the shifts that we've made in terminology, so a lot of the terminology that the committee is using is drawn from provincial resources, but we shifted away from exclusively using the term gender-based violence in relation to the survey and promotional materials, and are using terms like sexual harassment, sexual assaults, and other forms of gender-based violence to try and really project that it's a spectrum, and the recognition that that is a terminology that I think gets used more at a professional and more clinical level than deep student culture level. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm mindful that we might wiggle the clock a little to not have to pass a motion to extend our meeting. But we have one piece of board correspondence-ish to share. Apologies that you received a handout at the meeting today for a piece of correspondence provided to the board that didn't quite make the agenda package, but it will be contained in the electronic package for March, so that it forms a official part of our documentation. And then I'm just going to turn it over to our superintendent to speak on it briefly, and then we will follow up with any additional questions on it at our March board meeting.
I would just add the letter that you have, the copy there is written to Michelle. It's dated in February, I believe February 10th. I received a letter from the ombudsperson January 10th of 2025 that was actually attached to that letter. And it was received, myself and 59 other superintendents in BC received it. The intention was to provide some notice that there would be a public investigation, which I believe we got it on like a Thursday, and on Monday it was public, that there was going to be an investigation into the practice of exclusion of students within the K-12 sector. So exclusion meaning part-day programs. So it's about students who are not accessing full-time educational programming across BC. The intention of the investigation is to determine what the extent of those exclusions are across the province and whether school districts are executing, or it's to evaluate whether school districts and the Ministry of Education are administrating those exclusions fairly. The ombudsperson has already contacted senior school district of administrators, gathering relevant policies, procedures, and practices that are related to student exclusions. The intention as well is for the ombudsperson to be directly connecting with other district staff, teachers, educational assistants, and others, other education professionals to obtain that firsthand insight. So we'll find out what the ombudsperson discovers. It may lead to specific recommendations at individual district levels, as well as potentially provincial recommendations. So just wanted to take this moment in the public to underscore our support of it being a full, transparent process of providing all the information that's been requested to ensure that our practices are in alignment with the intentions of the provincial policies.
Thank you. And we were working through the lens of transparency, and then didn't have the letter, so provided the letter, and but everybody didn't have time to fully digest and come with their questions. So we're putting it on the agenda for the March 11th meeting, just to circle back. And so I'm going to lean this way to see if there's any questions to the board, public question period, and then I'm going to turn to my right and see if there's any questions to the board. And I can always look again, and then I'm going to go to my left and see if there's any questions from the public. Board, go ahead.
I was just curious if the board was aware of, there was a lovely show earlier by our superintendent about a senior boys basketball team making provincials. And I just wanted to make sure, just question the board if they were aware that the senior girls actually won the Islands in the AAA and are representing Isfeld for the first time. That's the first time in the school's history that the girls won. And so we're really proud of that. It's great for the boys, second place, great bad boys, second place, but the girls won gold.
Standing the superintendent's report.
Thank you.
So the board to the left.
Thank you very much.
Power, baby.
Make sure that I didn't miss anybody. And I do not see any hands raised from public, but partners and partner groups. And thank you all for attending tonight. And I would look for a motion to adjourn. Vice Chairperson Howe, seconded by Trustee McConnell-King. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. The meeting has been adjourned at 8:50.